here at DPI in Raleigh, and there's my email address. It'll be at the end as well. And thank you, Karen started recording for us, so I appreciate that. So we are recording now, and
I
we
think we're not off, but
and we'll be able to share this, like I said, at the end. So again, welcome. We have a small group here, so we won't do introductions or anything, but feel free at any point to jump in if you have questions or you have a comment or that type of thing. We are recording this, so it will be posted on our Moodle/Canvas. If you don't know, we're moving to Canvas this summer, so this slideshow and presentation will be on our Moodle and our Canvas. I believe August 1st is when the Canvas goes live for the state. If you have questions, just put them in the chat. I think the Q&A feature is enabled, but really, because we're a small group, you can just put them in the chat, and I have my chat window open up here on the side so I can see any questions. And again, feel free to stop me at any time. I don't anticipate this being too long, 20 minutes or so, but I'm happy to stick around as long as needed for any questions. So just pop them in the chat, and I can either answer them right away, or we can wait till the end, whatever works best for you. Okay, so here are the course outcomes for CY95 Exploring Digital Arts. If you're not aware, all new CTE courses that are state managed will have these course outcomes. This goes for both middle school and high school courses. So if you haven't seen a new course that DPI has released lately, this might be new to you. This is a new process that we're going through for all of our courses. And the idea of the outcomes here are really they're student facing. So instead of talking about standards and objectives, which we obviously will as educators here, but for students, and I also like to say for parents, this gives students and parents a good idea of what the course is going to actually entail. So think about this as the type of thing you might put on your syllabi when you're putting it out at the beginning of the year, or if you have, a lot of schools are required to put any kind of descriptions of the course on their public facing websites or parent information, that type of thing. So these are kind of the general overview things that students will be learning in the course. And then we use these outcomes to basically drive the development of everything else. So we develop these outcomes with industry and teacher experts, and then we base our standards and our objectives and our assessments and our unpacked content and all that other stuff that we're familiar with based on the outcomes. So it's a little bit kind of maybe backwards than what used to be done, where you kind of start with standards and objectives and you go from there. This is where really what do we want the students to learn, right, at a very high level. And again, we tried to be very conscious of putting it in student-friendly language. Sometimes that can be a little difficult, right, because as educators, we're always thinking in terms of RBT, right, Bloom's Revised Taxonomy, and kind of all these education words, right? But when we talk to students, we try to, talk in a language that's more accessible to them, especially at a middle school level, right? So the outcomes for this course, you can see them listed there. And we tried to make these, Brian and I tried to make these as broad as possible. That's one theme you're going to hear throughout the presentation today, that this course is really designed to be broad and accessible to a variety of audiences. Because it's a middle school course, we want it to be really adaptable to what your needs are in your school, right? So we're going to hit on some of the highlights of digital arts, but we are also trying to make it very broad in general, so that if you have a teacher that is really good at something or really passionate about something, or you have students that want to go in a certain direction, we feel like we've made the course adaptable to do that, right? While still maintaining, some consistency and continuity and some strong foundational skills. So, for instance, again, I'm not going to read to these. You can read them to there, but you'll notice, in the third bullet there, we talk about creating digital art, right? And so you can do that with videos. You can do that with 3D design. You can do that with 2D design and photography. You could do it podcasting. There's lots of different ways that you can do that, right? And so students will have a variety of opportunities to create things using digital art, I should say, using a variety of technologies. We're also talking a lot about how digital arts and media influence students, right? That was important for Brian and I, and something Brian has done a lot in his classroom. And so how is media affecting students today, right? And this can be the kind of the one that's can be interesting, right? Because it kind of opens up a lot of windows into social media, AI, generative AI, and that type of thing. And so, we want to make it as accessible as possible, right? Some schools in districts might have different policies about, what social media, is even discussed. And, we're not from the state level, we're not trying to tell you exactly how you have to teach this course, but we are trying to hit on the things that we think are important that young people understand, because as we all know, they're being inundated with digital media from a very young age, and especially when they, as y'all know, is that when they get into middle school, that's the time where it just really, I speak as a parent of a middle school student as well, right? It's the time of year or the time in their life where they're just inundated with this stuff. So we really wanted to kind of include some of that in the course. And then, of course, identifying careers, right? Because there are lots of careers, but also the field is really adapting because of AI and social media. This kind of whole idea of digital arts is really transforming. And what is that going to look like? So I have a feeling that Brian and I might be, adapting or adopting this course several times over the next few years, because this stuff is moving so fast, right? And so we'll talk a little more about that as the slideshow goes on today. So here are the standards. I know it's kind of small to read there, but I kind of split them in. There are 5 total, and so you can kind of see they're based on different percentages. So if you look at the weight there for standard 3, the 45% is really understanding technologies to make digital media in 2D, 3D, and multimedia. So that's kind of the almost 50% of the course is the students actually building things in 3D modeling, in 2D design, in podcasting, in video design, that type of thing. So, we're really, that's kind of where the meat of it is. But you'll also see there's other, 20% where we're talking about the presence and influence of digital art, 20% about how business and organizations use digital art, and then the other 2 standards looking at career pathways, and then a small percentage of the courses on how you display digital art, right? So, doing portfolios, both, digital portfolios, but also offline portfolios as well, kind of art galleries and that type of thing. So again, going back to the previous slide, we really try to make this, if you look at the standards in there, you'll notice there's no, and we'll talk about this in a minute, there's no specific technology in terms of, you have to do 2D design or you have to do 3D modeling. We really see this course as a great introduction for high school students. When they get to high school, then they can explore if they want to go the Adobe route, right? And they want to take Adobe courses where they're learning 2D design or video design, or they could go the 3D modeling route when they get to high school and take 3D modeling and animation. So that we really see this course as kind of a great way to kind of just give them a little taste of those different things and then get kids excited about those. And we also realize, middle schools and high schools have different pathways into, how that looks. What does it look like when a kid takes a digital arts class in middle school, and then how does that transition to high school? That looks very different across the state from school to school and district to district. So we were really mindful of that as we were designing these standards. So the curriculum guide is, when I share the slideshow, you'll be able to click on it, and I'll put the link in the chat here in a second as well, so you can access the curriculum guide. This is a brand new curriculum guide. It never existed before. So the curriculum guide is kind of the one-stop shop that a teacher is going to need for all the information that they need for this course. So this is like the one kind of document that you're going to need, and then there's going to be some additional resources that we'll talk about here in a minute. Okay, so inside of the curriculum guide, we're going to have course outcomes that we just talked about, right? We're going to have lots of unpacked content. Brian and I spent hours and hours and hours and hours meeting and talking and revising and making sure the unpacked content is as solid as it can be. I'll mention in a second, this course is in pilot, right? So there might be some things that we missed or some things that we want to add. And so that's the nice thing about a course being in pilot status is we have some flexibility to change it a little bit. So, keep that in mind as, you or your instructors are teaching this course. The curriculum guide also has essential questions. It It has teacher briefs that kind of break down what the main ideas and the topics are for the course or for the standards and objectives. It contains key terms. Anytime you're dealing with the technology class, right, there tends to be a lot of vocabulary. And in middle school, we know that can be challenging for students. But CTE, we pride ourselves on using content level vocabulary, right? So we're CTE teachers, but we also need to be teaching language arts and reading and writing. And so using this vocabulary that's specific to this industry, to the digital arts industry, I think will really help schools and teachers say, hey, okay, we can teach vocabulary, but we can do it in domain specific language. So we were really mindful of including key terms that were important for each of the standards and objectives. We have sample instructional activities, just a couple for each, and then we'll talk more about where you'll be able to get more of those. And then we have instructional resources, so extra websites, articles, tutorials, videos, those types of things that enhance each of the standards and objectives. So if you're not familiar with the curriculum guide, that's kind of the breakdown of what's in the curriculum guide. But again, for this course in particular, because there is no standardized curriculum, the teacher's not going to just say, okay, go to this website, everybody, and log in and get your curriculum. This is not that type of course. This course is has a lot of flexibility to it. So the curriculum guide is going to be the one-stop shop where the teachers is going to need to go and really immerse themselves in this document to figure out how best to teach the course. Because again, there's not just one vendor that we say, okay, go to Common Sense Media or go to this vendor and log in and get your curriculum. That doesn't exist for this course. We did look at that option, but the honest truth is there's not a lot, because this stuff is changing so fast, right? Digital arts is changing, and mostly because of AI, but for some other reasons as well. There really isn't a good vendor to do this because most of the stuff is outdated really quickly. So that's kind of why we decided to go this route where we're going to provide lots of resources, and then it's going to be up to the teachers as well as the consultant that will work with the teachers on this to kind of mine and organize those resources. And we'll talk a little more about that in a minute. So as I mentioned, this course is platform neutral. And what do I mean by that? I mean that it's not using a specific curriculum vendor and it's not using a specific piece of software. So for instance, like at the high school level, right, you might have Adobe Design. And Adobe Design, visual design, is going to use Adobe products. And you're going to have to go to the Adobe website and get all the software, that type of thing. That's not this course. Again, because it's a middle school course, we wanted to keep it as broad and as accessible as possible. So all the tools that are listed in the curriculum guide have a free option. Yeah, that's a great question about Chromebooks. Yeah, thank you, Brian. Brian answered the question, but I'll address that as well because that is a really good question. All the tools are free, or at least there's a free option. As most of us know, right, a lot of these tools nowadays, you can get the free version, and then if you pay money, you get the better version. But Brian and I were very mindful of finding tools that were free, or at least you could use the free version and use it to fidelity for the course. And they're, like Brian said in the chat there, they're about 99.9% web-based, which means they'll work fine on a Chromebook. Because again, we realize most middle schools are using Chromebooks. They can't download software like Adobe Photoshop. I mean, technically you can use Photoshop on a web browser, but so we were really mindful of like, okay, you're going to have a Chromebook and that's all you're going to have. And so these tools, I would even maybe say 100%. I like your 99.9 there, Brian, because it gives us a little flexibility, but I'm just thinking off the top of my head. I can't think of anything because I used all the tools as we were designing this and I never downloaded anything. So I think it might be 100% of the tools we recommend. Now, if you notice that third bullet there, we are going to be sharing lots of other resources because again, there is no specific vendor for this course. A teacher might say, okay, that's great, but I need a lot of resources then. And we hear you. We definitely hear that because if I was teaching this course, I would want a large toolbox, of tools to choose from. So in the CTE Resource Hub, again, if you didn't know, that's what we're transitioning to this summer. From Moodle. So Moodle will, Karen can correct me, she's in the meeting with us today, but I believe that shuts down July 31st. Is that correct, Karen?
The resource hub will be available July 1st and the Moodle
Okay.
will go down August 31st.
Gotcha. So I had it backwards. So there's going to be a month of transition there, right? Okay. Yeah. So we'll post both to the Moodle and to the resource hub, but beginning, August 1st, where the resource hub is where we're going to really be focusing our efforts, and that's a Canvas-based website. So we're switching to Canvas, if you weren't aware. And the nice thing about that is teachers, CIMCs, directors, everybody that has a NC Ed Cloud account, which if you're a teacher, public school teacher in North Carolina, you should have one, right? Because we use NC Ed Cloud for a lot of things. You'll be able to access Canvas and this new CTE resource hub through your NC Ed Cloud. And there'll be more information coming out. I believe districts have that information now, but there'll certainly be more coming out this summer. And certainly at CTE Summer Conference, we'll be talking a lot about it as well. So the point in all that is the curriculum consultant for this course will be sharing lots and lots of other resources that teachers will be able to use. So, it's going to be really important that, the teachers are active on this hub. I know from experience, I was a middle school and high school teacher for a long time. My first 3 or 4 years, I didn't even know the Moodle existed. Nobody told me. And then when I started teaching, I was like, oh, wait, there's other places I can go. I don't have to find resources myself. I can actually go somewhere where other teachers are sharing resources that, North Carolina teachers. So please, share this, tell teachers, hey, you need to be going to the new, it'll be a little transition because if you're used to Moodle, you can call it the new Moodle, you can call it the new Canvas, but the official name is the CTE Resource Hub. That's kind of the name we're using. But it'll be really important that teachers go to that CTE Resource Hub and find this course, CY95, and look at the list of other resources. Because again, this curriculum guide is kind of a static document, at least for a year. Now, again, because the course is in pilot, we can update the document year to year, but the newest resources and the most up-to-date stuff is going to be on the CTE Resource Hub. What grade level do you teach this course to? Yeah, that's a great question, Brian. If you see in the chat there. So I should have, I have a slide for Brian, but since he's here, I'll introduce him now. I have a slide at the end to thank him. But Brian, you can pop on if you want to turn on your mic. Brian is a teacher in Dare County, and he's been teaching a version of this course as a local course option as an LCO for a long time now. And so he is an amazing educator that does some really cool and interesting, innovative things with his students. So he's the one that really kind of developed this curriculum guide, and then our team at DPI obviously assisted him and helped him. But Brian is really the expert. He's the person that's been doing this day to day, year to year. So a lot of this stuff, or 99.9% of the stuff you see in the document, is stuff that Brian has done with his students, has been tested with students, he's had success with, he's had challenges with, and so he's tried to adopt it and that type of thing. So yeah, so Brian said he taught at 8th grade, 7th grade. We think it certainly 6th grade accessible as well. We try to make it as broad as possible for 6th, 7th, or 8th grade. Okay. So again, platform neutral. So if a teacher says, okay, well, what software do I need? It's up to the teacher, right? And that can be a good thing and a bad thing, right? Especially new teachers, sometimes they want specific answers. We totally understand that. But on the other hand, we didn't want to make it so, you had to download this piece of software, because the reality is it's going to look different across the state. Some states can download things and put them on their computers. Other districts can't, it looks different from district to district across the state. So there is no one specific piece of software that teachers and students will be using. It is platform neutral. Our courses, or this course in particular, aligns really well with TSA. So if you're not familiar with TSA, the Technology Student Association, would highly recommend starting a middle school chapter at your school. If you haven't, TSA is really taking off across North Carolina, particularly this year. The middle schools, at the state level, was, I think, the highest it's ever been. So TSA middle school is really starting to take off. And I'm biased, obviously, but we love TSA. I mean, all the CTOs are great. So if you do another CTO, that's great as well. But we tend to to really work closely with TSA, and we think what they do is really amazing. All the CTSOs are amazing, but TSA is great. So here's some of the competitive events that align with this course, right? So STEM animation, digital photography, podcasting, mass media, promotional marketing. There's probably a couple others, but those are the 5 that Brian and I kind of really looked at deeply and said, yeah, I think there's some good crossover here. So, remember, the whole point of a CTSO is to be intracurricular, right? So you could teach this course and do one of the TSA regional, state, or national competitions at the same time. It's not extracurricular, it's intracurricular, right? So we were really mindful as we designed this course of like, okay, how could students, do some of these activities, but also if the school so chooses or the teacher so chooses and they have a TSA chapter, how could they also, compete in those areas. Now to do TSA, right, there's kind of a certain process you have to go through, and that's kind of a separate conversation, but that's something that myself or the other curriculum consultants here at DPI can help you with. If that's something that you're interested in, we can set up a meeting and walk you through and introduce you to Dr. Taylor, who's the CTSO lead advisor for the state of North Carolina. So if that's something you're interested in, please let us know. My contact information will be at the end, and we'll be happy to help facilitate that. So this course is in pilot status, as I mentioned. So we will have check-ins throughout the next school year and into 2027. So those specific dates will be posted in the CTO resource hub. I believe there's going to the first one is scheduled for October of 2026. And so if you're not familiar with what a check-in is, it's when a teacher, a director, a CIMC, anyone that's involved in the course, not students, but any adult that's interested in the course, can pop in, and the curriculum consultant will be there, and we will answer any questions that you have, things that are working well. The other idea is we're trying to build a community, right? Because we know that teachers learn best from each other, right? Here at DPI, we can provide suggestions, but y'all are the ones in the classroom every day dealing with the ins and outs of what it takes to teach a course like this. So you're going to have a better idea of, how these courses are working. So the check-ins are designed to be a place where teachers can come, and the curriculum consultant will kind of lead the discussion and just have, share best resources, things that are working, things that are not working. What standard are you teaching right now? What objective are you teaching right now? That type of thing. So those dates will be posted. It's a middle school course, so the POL is not super important, but it is just local, right? So you'll develop your own proof of learning. And this course does satisfy the CS graduation middle school offering requirement, right? So if you're not aware, starting next year, unless we hear otherwise, but right, Karen? Starting next year, the middle school and high school computer science graduation requirement goes into full effect. No waivers, no exemptions, no nothing. It goes into effect starting next school year. So if you're not aware, part of that legislation says every middle school has to offer a computer science course. So if you offer this course to your students, you are satisfying that part of the legislation. Okay, doesn't affect high school at all, but this is a middle school course, so we're just talking about middle school. So here's my thanks to Brian. So again, Brian, do you want to pop on and say anything? Brian, like I said, Brian is in Dare County. He's been teaching a version of this course as an LCO, as a local course option for several years. And we really are excited to have him help us. And anything you want to share about it, Brian?
No, Mike, I appreciate the time. I appreciate being part of this. I see Karen. I haven't seen her in a while. Thank you so much for starting me on this journey. I've really enjoyed working with Mike and coming up with this course. And anybody that's got any questions, please reach out. I was kind of in the dark for the last 2 years trying to figure this out. And this year, with the help of Mike and DPI, we've kind of dialed it in. And I'm really proud of from where this course was. If you didn't know, this course had 4 standards that were kind of the most loosey-gooseyest things that you could do under the sun. And I think we really dialed it in. But I actually enjoy it more now because I know what I'm supposed to be teaching instead of what I think I should be teaching. So thank you. And I hope I can help anybody else grab this and add this to their middle school curriculum. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, Diane has a good question in the chat. And I should have introduced Karen. I'm sorry. So Karen is my boss. She's the section chief for computer science and IT at Tech Ed at DPI. Karen, there's a question about, can any CTE license teach this course? Would you be able to answer that?
We are currently working on that
Okay.
with the license. But that is our intention.
Okay.
But we're got a couple more hoops to jump through.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good one. Let's definitely, I will write that down, Diane, and I'll put that on my list of things to investigate. And I have your contact information here, so we'll definitely reach out when we have a definitive answer. So I mentioned a couple times, Brian and I developed this course, but this course is actually going to be handed off to one of my colleagues, Natalie Holbert. So Natalie Holbert is another curriculum consultant here at DPI. So there's her picture and her contact information. So starting July 1, so in about a month, she will be your point of contact. Now, of course, we all work together, so you can always reach out to me. And if I can't answer it, I'll forward it to Natalie. But Natalie will kind of be the expert of this course starting July 1st. And so Natalie is again will be taking over the management of the course, and this will all be in the resource hub as well. So there'll be a link there that says contact DPI, and that email probably will go to all of us. So again, you can reach out to anybody on our team, at our computer science, IT, and tech ed team at DPI, including myself, and we'll get you an answer. But Natalie will be the person in charge of kind of coming up with the resources. She'll be the person doing those pilot check-ins that I talked about starting in October of 2026. And so she'll kind of be your kind of expert on the course. Okay, so that's really all I have. I wanted to leave plenty of time. I'll leave my contact information up on the last slide as well. And there it is there. So you can, again, reach out to me at any time, but I will certainly, we'll probably stop the recording, and then I will stick around as long as needed if anyone has any specific questions. Yeah, and Karen put in the chat, there's our general email. So if you ever have a question about this course or really any of the computer science, IT, or tech ed courses, that's kind of a general email, CSIT, CSITT at dpi.nc.gov. It's in the chat, and that goes to our whole team. So feel free to use that. And then the way that works is it'll get forwarded to the appropriate person that manages that course, and we'll get back to you within 24 business hours with an answer. Or if we don't have the answer, we'll certainly find it for you. Go ahead and stop the recording here. Actually, I guess, Karen, do you have to stop it? Because I think you start, or can I stop it? Let's see. Recording. Yep, I can stop it. There we go.